Hello everyone, my name's Gary and I thought I'd just do a little video explaining my newish rack. In fact, it's an old gear put in a new case, which I'm calling my Berliny School case because it's very geared towards that period, I suppose, the old school mid-late 70s synthesizer driven. It used to be called krautrock and a few other terms, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. The Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, and so on of that period. Very sequencer-led music, often very extemporaneous. Is that the right expression? Meaning it sort of goes on for long periods of development and growing and so on. So I thought I'd go through this, which is really just a five component sort of setup here. The first thing I want to explain is the reason for using all these. Let me just dig one out, another one. I've got a whole separate bag of them now. These are right angle cables. You can see it's not a traditional patch sort of Euro rack setup. Everything's pretty flat. I even had to saw off, I don't know if you can see them on the video, I had to saw off these buttons because they were too big for this case. If I show you the edge of it, I don't know if you can see that. So this is the lid. I definitely wanted it to be transportable. Whoops, just hit the mic. So that goes on there, and there's not a lot of leeway in terms of the height, so everything's sort of kept pretty flat. Just to go over the basic system here, the main mixer is my traditional Doppler 138 4-channel and pans, so that's the main audio output. So you'll see me adjusting these for where the audio is routed. It all goes through the the really basic but very useful NTS1 over here, which is now strapped in, and I've also epoxied all of the jacks in here so that they're not going to cause any problems like sometimes they do. And also they've got these right angle jacks as well, so there's no tension on the plugs. The whole thing's bolted in. I also developed it this way so that I could sort of play the keyboard, use the mode buttons here, these little black ones, and also adjust the knobs with one hand. So with one hand I can do that. I think previously it was a bit convoluted, but now I can choose the oscillator just by pressing that button, and with my fingers do that. So just to briefly explain the audio sources, we've got this area here is a Model D, traditional Moog copy from Behringer. I've had this for years now. It's been getting on for 5 years, and it hasn't missed a beat, so well done Behringer on that one. So that's the first main audio source on here, which is coming from this, coming into audio 1. The next audio is on number 2 is actually a newish bit of gear. I've got the WASP Pest, which let's just get up. Oh, it's on hold at the moment. Which is going into 2. The third source is sort of hidden in the cables here, is this tip-top BD808 bass drum, which is being driven from this Ornament and Crime. Let's just have a bit more of an interesting beat there. Let's go to 7/4. And then finally we've got another Behringer bit of gear, relatively new one called Brains, which is onto channel 4 here. And then the NTS1 acts as like a fifth sound source because I can put it into ARP mode, press a note, and let's just make sure use that as a fifth sort of sound. I could potentially use it as a drone and all sorts of things. I mean, each of the instruments could be a drone, just a long note, if I wanted. But let's just go through the sequencing next. So this is pretty straightforward. The sequential controller here, the 960, I'm using all 3 rows independently. So there's a row. So this first row, for example, the note CV is going into the Model D. And the gate for that is coming from, I'll explain probably the gating and ratcheting and things separately, but the gate is coming from a clock. So the main clock is from the NTS1, so I've got full control over the tempo. You can see that's, let's go back to 115 just for the moment. So that main clock's going into this mult here, which you can't really see. It's just literally everything's coming off that one. So it goes in to the top here, actually goes around the back and over the top, and then this is your standard clock pulse. One of them feeds the div, the 2 HP div here, which is doing most of the ratcheting work. I'll explain that very briefly. Just drop that back a bit, envelope. So the gate is going to both the filter and the envelope here on the Model D, and this rate control is coming from the second row of the sequential 960, which I think I've explained before. So what that means is that white lead here, if I increase the voltage on this row of any of the steps, like say for example the second one, it's actually increased the rate of the gate coming from there, and the gate is this orange one going around the back into these two. So just on the second step, gradually increasing the voltage. It gives me a lot of control over the performance ratcheting. So if I've got like a 5-step sequence, like that low note for example, I can just in the middle of the piece while I'm doing other things, just add the ratchet to that, and then probably with one hand I can turn that down and add a ratchet to the second note. I could ratchet all of them and have a sort of double beat thing going on, and then turn them down. It helps to have big hands so I can sort of control more of them at once. Obviously the sequential controller has got switches here, so I can switch in and out different parts of the sequence. And during performance as well, I can change the notes on this top row for the Model D. I can introduce, for example, octaves or second oscillators. I tend to have it set so I just have the oscillators on the volumes here. And the LFO, of course, controlling the built-in filter. And of course I actually control the main volume. I'll leave the audio up normally and just have these mixable. So if I just wanted to introduce a low C, because this oscillator I've got set to not being controlled by the voltage in. I can just turn that up. I could turn that into a drone, like I said, if I wanted, just by increasing the overall envelope. Still have a bit of a pulse on that one. Of course, the any sequencing benefits from a little bit of delay, so this is another reason for having, as well as this being a tone generator, it is an effect unit. So delay, press the delay button there, let's do the ping one, which is a sort of stereo delay. And immediately we get into back there. And these, in fact, this is a bonus. I actually put little buttons on here, and I can actually just roll these, get a bit more sensitivity in the controls. Right. So that's rows 1 and 2 here controlling this. Row 3 is actually controlling the ratchet of the brains. So, and brains is being sequenced by a separate sequencer here, this Behringer 182. So let's just turn up brains. So I've got step control over this one. I can't introduce random steps in the middle of the sequence. It has to be sort of a sequential, in series. And brains, of course, has got control over the release and the envelope and various oscillators. Lots of parameters to adjust it with. I've actually got a LFO going in. I'll talk about LFOs later, I suppose, going into the morphing control of this one, so it's constantly sort of shifting its waveform, if you like. Bit of a sort of stringy sound. So this sequencer is also ratcheted because it's coming from the second part of this div, because this 2 HP div here has got 2 clocks, or it gives out 2 gates, if you like, and the third row, you can see this bottom white lead is controlled from this. If I turn the release down a bit, you can see this row again is controlling the ratcheting. So if you have more steps, and of course if you cross the ratchet, so let's have like 2 and 4 for brains, and then 1 and 2 for the Model D. I'll have to tune those guys in a minute. So we've got the ratchet on the first one on Model D, and then the second step the ratchet's going to the brains. So you can get some nice sort of cross ribbons going there. The second audio is coming from, as I said, Pest, which is a nice sort of complement to the very analogue-y sounds from the Model D and the sort of wave table sounds from brains. This one, put a bit of an LFO on it. Give it some. I can do very nice drones with this. So it's great as like a bed at the beginning of the piece, just sort of growing and control over the resonance. But it's more than a drone, of course. It's got a built-in sequencer. So before I show the sequencer, the BD808, just to have a bit of a pulse going, so you can hear it. You can change the tone of the bass drum, of course, and the decay and all sorts of things. Well, let's just have that for the moment. In fact, more of a regular beat. Let's go for 8/4. I'm actually using a Euclidean clock here, which is just an easy way of having a sort of control over the trigger into the bass drum. There's also a second Euclidean I could use for other things, I'll talk about in a second. But I was talking about the sequencer because this one's got a nice built-in sequencer. If I just use a double key combination, and it's nice in my hands, I can just sort of switch that with one hand. I just cleared the sequencer there, but turning the sequencer on, and then playing in a sequence of notes. Clear it, and let's go up an octave so you can hear it a bit better. And the LFO on the tone there. It's got an arpeggiator as well. So once you're in sequencer mode, I can just press the white. There's like two mode shift things here, a yellow and a white. If I press the white one, it turns into an arpeggiator. That starts flashing, so now I can play sort of chords. And turn the sequencer off. So this is kind of cool. I've been using it for solo lines. And using the LFO just to control, add a bit of colour. And when I want to go crazy as well, the LFO is controlling the fold here, so it's doing that. So like when I've got a sequencer going, I'm bringing a ratchet. I've actually sort of learned to play this with one hand. He says making the balls up of it. And when I want to do some crazy things, there's a little frequency modulation control here. And the other thing, there's a couple of loose little patch leads here. For example, so this one is actually coming from the ratchety third row of this. And so if I just bring brains back in, which is the main control, the main output the gate for this. I can actually take that same clock and put it into the dynamics gate, which is, if you like, the attack part of the wave on this. I've also got control of the waveforms on WASP Pest, so if I want to change slightly different sounds. So that, remember, this is controlling the dynamics. It's still getting a standard clock in. So if I want to increase the and need to sort this lead out. Actually, it's probably better with a loop over the top one just for temporary stuff, and turning the ratchets off. And then if I just want to deactivate this this dynamics gate, just take it off. Probably find a better solution. I don't know if you can see this. There's a switcher actually here which I'm not using, which allows me to route gates through it. So I'm going to probably move that unit there, which is, like I said, not being used, down here, so I can switch the various gates coming out. In this case, sorry, these two into here, so I can switch it around. At the moment it's fine just doing this. And take that off, and I can quickly go into like a hold mode. If I just want to have like a constant drone, like a low drone. bit of colour on the LFO. Right, so that's the WASP Pest. I've got to investigate a whole bunch of more uses of this. Turn the hold off. Particularly using the patch spray, you can probably have a lot of fun with that. I've also got a filter here, this WASP filter, which I've had for a long time. It's sort of been sitting pretty dormant, but I thought I'd introduce it because I can feed things through it very easily. For example, the audio from the Model D, I can put it into the input into the WASP, and then put the WASP back into the audio. It's not the most efficient way of introducing it. It might say, why are you double filtering the Model D, for example, because there's a filter already on here. Let's just have a listen at what the WASP does. So it's mainly about overdriving the WASP to get some really nice, interesting sounds. And it's all about this mix control, choosing which bit of the filtering you want to use. Obviously you need the input to be quite bright so that you can control it through here. I've actually got this WASP modulated from this LFO. I mean, there's not many LFOs I've got to use. I could use one from the WASP Pest, and one LFO is coming out of here, so this is controlled by this rate here. So that's pretty crazy sounds you can get from this. Bringing down the bass, increase the LFO speed. Suddenly we're into Jaws harp territory. Right, enough of that. So I'll just put that back for now, but that's why the WASP is there. And again, I'm going to find a better switching solution so I can patch the audio in easier without too much repatching during a performance. The last thing to show you, I won't go into brains because it's got a bunch of controls to control the sounds, including percussion sounds as well. So if I want to get a bit more rhythmic, I can choose this green row here, which is a bunch of sort of rhythm type things. To slow the tempo down, by the way, of anything, let's turn the ratchets off. I can just control, I've left these to expose. These are the main rates from the div. So I can go pretty slow against the main pulse. And pretty wacky sounds, and then increase the rate here. And again, the sequencer comes from here. If I just want one note, I'll just choose one note there. Trying to see what we've got here. Turn the bit of a crackle. Oh, there we go. That's what I was after, I think. The output of brains is quite hot, so I've actually got an attenuator cable here. So I'll turn it up a bit because it's a little too low. And the nice thing with brains is you can go from this sort of percussive sound, and by pressing the bank control you can jump to the melodic row, which is the one above. That wasn't very successful. Let's try that again, because I've got the envelope pretty static there. Let's try that. Oops. Sorry, I've got this NTS1 on a small power bank here, which is annoyingly cutting out. I'll just reboot it and it will start again. So yeah, switching banks goes from like a percussive sound, something melodic. Introducing the delay again, press delay, ping. I'm setting the tempo here just to 115 for the moment, just because I've noticed that the delay full right on this time parameter here sort of fits that. Again, those repeated 1/8 dotted eighth type things going. The other thing, the last thing part of the piece is the NTS1 itself. So this, like I said, it's an effects unit. If I wanted the big reverbs, the reverb button, control over the size of the reverb, and then the delay. And it's got delay built in. It's also got a modulation, so I can have things like phasing and flanging. Remember, this is master though, so I have to be careful of how I use it. Use a slightly warmer sound. The other thing, like I said, is the oscillator. One of the problems with the NTS1, as those who've used them know, is this effect. So you can see the built-in oscillator is way too loud. So I had someone, someone very graciously built me a variation on the Volca bass waveform, which I just selected there. I chose oscillator, selected it, and they built a volume control on this last button here. So let's just get a constant arpeggio going. So I can actually mix this in with its overall sound. So let's get the Model D in. Turn the reverb down a bit because that's a bit too much. Bring the West Pest, perhaps just a low note for now. Bit of reverb, and then the bass drum. So that's a basic groove going. So 5 steps just to make it a bit more interesting, and make the bass drum 7 steps. So what I was saying was that the NTS1 I can now mix in using this volume control. So you can hear it coming in there. I've got control over the filter, so it doesn't have to be that brash. And then let's turn everything else down apart from the NTS1. And as you know, the NTS1, the built-in arpeggios, for example, I can choose minor. I can choose how many steps. Let's have 5. I can choose the directions. So I'm basically pressing this flashing key here and then choosing, this is for the arp up and down, this is for how many steps. So 7. And the filter. it has got a built-in LFO as well. If I keep my finger on that, I can choose the speed of the LFO and so on. But the main thing, like I said, is this ability to turn this down, and it actually picks up where it left off. So I don't know if you saw that. So if I'm doing something over here and then I want to go down from that, I can just, as soon as it starts to move, it picks it up from where it left off. So that's really good, particularly when you've got like a, let's say you're starting off with some atmospheric WASP Pest and you want to introduce a fast arpeggiator. Bring the filter up. And it's got control over the envelope as well. The attack and the release. I find that the NTS1 is there really for, because there's enough going on with the Model D and brains, it's there as like a supporting role. I could turn it into a drone as well. I sometimes do that because on the envelope I can turn it to, let's see, whoops, open, so it's constantly on. So I'll just press that. Now I want to turn it up. So the ADSR open mode, I don't know if that's readable on the video. Sorry. Envelope open leaves it constantly open, and when I choose the right oscillator, I accidentally went off the one I wanted there. So let's choose the Volca. Open ADSR, and then volume, so I can control the drone. And then with the delay, ping pong delay, and a bit of space reverb. And this is all coming from the NTS1 so far, remember? And then back to the oscillator. I can basically turn the drone up, so I could be starting over here and introduce this as a separate drone. Bit reverby. And then of course start to introduce some sequences. Playing with the ratcheting. I just turn the filter down on the NTS1 there. Bring the brains in, perhaps just on one note as well. Introduce more notes in the sequences. And this is what I mean about this wheel. It's kind of, it's not really a wheel, it's a button, but doing that sort of thing is quite nice. And traditional Tangerine Dreamy type things are often introducing like the octave bass all of a sudden. So that's why it's nice to have the Model D separate oscillators and controls over them. And the sequencer on this, I could, for example, turn on the sequencer and then do some repeated slow notes. And then for this one, for example, use the ratcheting on the third row. make the rhythm more interesting. And now make the second sequencer, brains, a bit more complex. Changing the notes as I'm progressing here. And then gradually sort of bassify everything. Take the reverb off. And introduce the bass drum. And go into something a bit more punchy, I suppose. Get rid of the drones, so turn off the open envelope there. Changing the sequence here. Something a bit more bass-liney perhaps. Right, okay, I'll stop there because then otherwise I'll end up just going into a bit of a jam. So that's currently where it is. Like I said, I'm going to get this switcher working so I can easily move the gates to different instruments using the switcher and various outputs just by pressing these red buttons. Not connected at the moment. I'm going to do more stuff with the LFO at the moment. There's a sort of couple of LFOs moving around. I want to be able to control them better. But otherwise, I think it's sort of getting there. Need to, get under the bonnet of this a bit more, and probably brains, although that's usually a sort of secondary instrument. So hopefully that made sense and that you enjoyed it. And yeah, any comments or questions, please ask. It's pretty simple. The only thing I didn't talk about is really just this ornament and crime, which is a much more sophisticated bit of gear sat in here. It's really just operating as a dual quantizer for this row and this, just turning them into a various scales. So that's that side of the benispheres rather than hemispheres, and then this side is a couple of Euclidean rhythms. Just one of them at the moment controlling the bass drum, but I might have a second one controlling this and make it switchable. So hopefully that made sense. Thanks very much. Bye bye.